Welcome to the Sustainable Travel Podcast. I'm Emma, your host from That Travel. This is a podcast that interviews a range of different travelers from different backgrounds to see what sustainable travel means to them. Today, I am here with Teresa and Dennis from Human Travel Stories, who are traveling from Germany to Australia by public transport as much like locals as they possibly can. And today, we're going to be talking about exactly that, how traveling like a local can be a more sustainable way to travel. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you for having us.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you on here. You've been listening to the show, right?
Yes, we have. Actually, I was bed-bound a few weeks ago. I had a food poisoning. I had a bit of a bad fish that I ate in a local restaurant. And so I couldn't move and I couldn't leave the bed. I was like, well, let's listen to a few new podcasts. And yours was actually among them. And I listened to a few episodes and I thought there's a lot of things we have in common, very like-minded people you have on the show. And so yeah, it's an honor to be here with you today.
Oh no, I'm very sorry you were bedbound. You look much better. So
Thank you.
I can assume you're feeling better.
Yes, I do.
It was
Good.
already a couple of weeks ago, we
Yeah.
have to say that. Yeah.
Right.
Luckily, he's fine. He's fine now.
Oh, that's good. Well, I'm so happy that the podcast popped up anyway for you and that we got to connect in this way because I definitely feel just from even looking at your page and listening to what you guys have been doing that we have so much in common. I mean, tell us in your words, so how did you get into traveling this way? Because going from Germany to Australia, that's very cool. How did you get into all of that?
Since we have known each other, we always wanted to do a big trip
Yeah.
and we always wanted to do an overlanding trip. And the idea was we wanted to feel the distance. We wanted to feel and see how people, how culture, how societies, how food, how languages, everything changes from one region to another, from kilometer to kilometer, basically. And this has always been our dream. And then we had this idea actually came one evening. You look on the map and you want to do a big overlanding trip, and you're in Germany and you're thinking, okay, what is the furthest you can go overland?
Yeah.
And it's actually Indonesia. You can go all the way overland to Indonesia. And then I was like, well, I have been to Australia 15 years ago. I have people there that are like family to me. I would love to see them again. Let's try to go to Australia. And this is how the idea came up. Was one evening
Much overnight.
overnight. And we were like, okay, let's do it. And then we arranged our lives according to that. We were saving during COVID. We got rid of our stuff at home, basically. And yeah, that's how the idea was born. And of course, also we didn't want to fly for different reasons. But one big reason is, we of course the ecological aspect, but it's also, we don't want to overfly or fly over the regions that are probably a bit more challenging
Yeah.
because probably these regions will be the ones we like the most. And it has been somehow the case that
Yeah.
the regions we thought maybe are not that interesting were actually really interesting, and we met the kindest humans there.
Yeah, I always find that's the way. Like it's always somewhere where you think, God, why would I go there? You don't hear that much about it. And it often ends up being just the most amazing place because the people are so welcoming. They're so I feel like in these places where you don't hear about too much, if they don't get too many international tourists, they're so proud of their home and they really want to show you,
Absolutely.
like, this is how we live.
Yes.
Absolutely. The hospitality has been beyond words. Like sometimes, I can't describe how generous people are. And I'm always thinking, in Germany, if you see, or in Europe, if you see a foreigner, you will probably not welcome him or her that much because you think there are already so many tourists. And then
Yeah.
you experience this amazing hospitality in many, many parts of the world. It's
Mm.
leaving me speechless.
I felt exactly the same as that when, because most of the listeners probably know, but my husband and I, for our honeymoon, we traveled overland in Africa for 6 months from Cape Town to Cairo. And one of the things that really struck me was, God, I'm miserable when I'm at home and I see people. I don't stop and say hi. I wouldn't, if I saw a stranger who was like struggling and obviously struggling, I like to think I'd like help if they were really struggling, but I probably wouldn't if it was just like directions or something like that. And going through those kind of countries, I was realizing people are just like so aware of us. People are looking at us, and if we're struggling, if we can't find where we're going, they're coming, they're helping us. They're like so kind and so generous. And when I came home, I was like, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna like when I see people in trouble, I'm gonna really try. But it's a very hard mindset to shift.
100% agree on that. That was a learning we had after a few months into this trip. We were like, as you say, we would never do this at home usually, but people looked after us so well. And especially when you're in a foreign country, you're looking for public transportations, for the desk to buy the ticket, you are lost in so many ways and so many times on this trip. And people always helped us. And it really made us thinking, let's bring this attitude back home. Let's
Yeah.
really, as you say, look for people who might be lost, who might, need help or just are in a foreign country, want to need some information. But yeah, there's a big difference between, let's say, Europe and other parts of the world where also it's special for them to see a foreigner, maybe. So yeah, there's so
Yeah.
many reasons why it's just so nice to travel to these least explored countries.
Yes, and also I
It's
think in
it's
Europe we have this kind of attitude. It's not necessarily a bad attitude, but we don't want to draw attention to people who look different. We don't want to single them out. So we're not like always looking in the same way that perhaps people are in countries where like they don't get as many white people, for example, or they don't get people who dress like you or look like you. And it's a little more difficult for us in some ways because of that cultural barrier, but it's definitely a great thing to do. I completely agree. And actually, this episode is a little bit topical because a couple of days ago on my travel page, I actually was posting about, flying and the fact that flying is perhaps like considered one of the worst parts of travel for the environment. And should we be cutting that down, or kind of is it okay? And looking at the statistics. And I was finding it was really interesting that people were kind of going immediately to, well, yeah, that's all well and good, but I can't afford a train. And I was thinking, that's so funny that I'm going to be talking to Teresa and Dennis because I bet you haven't taken that many trains when you've been traveling like locals.
Actually, I've taken quite many trains.
Have you?
yes.
I mean, it depends. Not in every country there is a proper railway system in place. In some countries, there just is no railway. But surprisingly, in many countries, there were trains. And to give you an example, in Central Asia, many countries have very good railway system. We talk
Yeah,
about Kazakhstan or Uzbekistan, for example, simply because Kazakhstan, for example, is one of the biggest countries in the world.
yeah.
And the railway system, surprisingly, is very, very good. It
Is it?
connects all the important places, and people frequently use it.
Yeah,
And it is affordable.
It's true. In Europe, the prices are more expensive. And in Europe, it's often an alternative to take a bus
yeah,
instead of the train. And I hope there will be a change in the future in Europe to, they have been cutting down railway connections, and I have the feeling it's getting back up on track.
yeah,
And there are more tracks, or they are re-establishing old routes. Um, yeah, so in Europe it is still a big challenge, but in like for example in Turkey you have trains, you have buses. In Central Asia, the train system is very cheap. I just checked before, a 24 hours overnight sleeper train where you get bed sheets and a towel and everything. And you can actually sleep very well. You get hot water, and it is 13 euros
wow.
per person.
That's certainly more affordable than
So
Europe.
yeah, I think in Europe, like in Germany, I took a lot of trains, and also in Europe, connecting Germany to other countries, you need to plan a bit in advance. That's the thing about the trains in Europe.
With Deutsche Bahn, you
Um,
definitely need to plan in advance.
oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting what you both said there. So I think there's this massive misconception that trains are really expensive everywhere. And as you said, it's actually not the case. Like, yes, in Europe, the train prices are elevated because we have a really good train network. And essentially, like, there's a lot of trains. So people need to pay more to keep this rail network that is so extensive and massive up and running, and also the privatization, all of that. But the other thing that you both mentioned is buses. Like they just get completely ignored. I think buses are fantastic. Like they're such. I always would think of a bus first.
Yeah.
Absolutely. The big advantage we as Europeans have, and this is something that we forget until we see bigger countries,
Yeah.
is Europe is small.
Yeah.
We have taken so many 24-hour buses, 28-hour buses, and we have crossed so many big countries. And if you just put this in comparison to how far you could go in Europe, you could travel from, I don't know, from the UK to down to Spain in the same amount of time.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I think we as Europeans, we have it actually easier because there
Yeah.
is no such big distance, you know?
Yeah, it's all relative. I think we get in our heads about these big distances and we're like, well, I couldn't possibly take a 16-hour bus. Gosh, like that's massive. But it's actually not as long as you think, because people will quite happily take, say, a 12-hour flight and think nothing of it. They'll just be like, well, I needed to do that to get to this place. And when you've added in the waiting time at the airport, it's probably about 14 hours, 16 hours.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's
Absolutely.
really interesting. But so obviously getting through all these different countries, you've had a lot, I imagine, of overlanding. But what about the countries where you have to cross bodies of water? Like, how do you travel like a local there?
It was actually only once the
Okay.
case, and that was the Caspian Sea. And there
Hmm.
is actually a ferry. So in this case, you have cargo ships running between, in this case, Azerbaijan and Kazakhstan,
Hmm.
and they do take passengers. So
Nice.
while probably the locals in this case would rather fly, we as travelers took the ferry, and it was a very adventurous and interesting experience because we were literally the only travelers on this cargo ship. There were only truck drivers from Asia and yeah, from pretty much Asia,
Wow.
and actually one other Kazakh, 19-year-old Kazakh boy also traveling. And so it was a very, very interesting experience to be the only travelers on this ferry. But it is a regular mode of transportation, maybe not one that in this particular case locals think of too
Yeah.
much, but it was a way for us to continue the trip without having to take flight.
How long did that take you?
That's
The journey itself,
22 hours.
22 hours, but the overall journey from door to door, 4 days,
Oh my
because
God.
there's no schedule. Because yeah, the thing is, it's dependent on the weather
Yeah.
conditions. It's depending on the port being busy or not. So what happened? We arrived in Kazakhstan and we could see Kazakh land, but we had to wait on the water still for almost, I don't know, 12 hours
Yeah.
because the port apparently was busy.
Oh my God.
So if you have the time, like I think factor time is the most
Yeah.
important thing here. Like if you have the time, you kind of can embrace the journey, and it doesn't matter for you when you arrive. You
Yeah.
can just enjoy the journey. But while if you have an appointment in next Tuesday on the Kazakh side, it's maybe not the smartest way to travel.
Yeah.
But for us, it was the experience to take the ferry.
Yeah,
Yeah. And
definitely.
not only that, I think we got the call from the harbor that the ferry is gonna leave. We should come to the harbor now in the evening. And we were like, okay, the ferry's leaving. We had a local contact who called them for us, which was very helpful. So we are happy the ferry is leaving. We rushed to the harbor, to the port, just to find out that we have to stay another night over there and that the
Oh.
ferry is probably leaving sometime tomorrow. So we spent the night at the port, which was an interesting experience. But when it comes to this ferry, you need to have some patience and time. There, you need to have time. But there are other ferries. We took a ferry, I mean, a very obvious one in Istanbul. It's part of the public transport. It leaves every, I don't know, 15 minutes.
Hmm.
It's a very short distance, but there we had to take a ferry. We also had to take a ferry here to the island. We are now in South Vietnam, and you need to take a ferry there. I think there is a ferry every second hour, I think. And you just go there to the port, you buy a ticket and wait. That's it. So it's actually not that much of a difference than taking a train.
Mm.
You need to do some research beforehand. Where is it leaving? When is it leaving? You need to show up at the port, buy your ticket there, and wait until the next one comes. So,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course, yeah,
As you said, it's probably a case of needing to have a little bit more time, but you know, if you have that time, it's quite the experience.
Yeah.
We took one in we took a ferry in Malawi, and it was just so funny. Like the whole experience was so funny. Like, there was people who like had left things on the port, so they're like calling the ferry's like turning around, going back to get them kind of thing. And then it like gets to this island and they're like, yes, we'll probably leave in maybe an hour. And then like 4 hours later, they're still like loading
Yeah.
and unloading. And you're just like, yeah, this is yeah. You need the time.
Patience, patience is a virtue that you take away from traveling in general and traveling by public transport in specific, because there is no schedule sometimes. It just leaves when
Yeah.
it's full, or it just leaves when they made sure that no one forgot things in the
Yeah.
port, or whatever other reasons. Maybe the son of someone is late and he
Yeah.
needs to be on the ferry, so we'll wait
Yeah,
for
or
him. Yeah,
maybe they like didn't get their license plate check. That happened to us once,
yeah,
5 hours waiting for them to do that. Like, it's really funny because as you've been saying a few times before, like in Europe, we have it so we're so lucky. Like everything runs to a schedule, everything's just like almost like clockwork. Even when people complain that it's late, it is for a reason that is justifiable. Whereas sometimes when you're traveling through parts of the rest of the world, I think we forget that people really like base their lives around humans and not around appointments. It's like they need to ensure that this human gets where they want to go. So they're going to kind of like wait for them, which I guess is the whole point of your account.
Yes. I
Yeah.
asked, when you were traveling in Africa, you mainly took buses and shared taxis, or
Yeah.
was there a train somewhere?
Yeah, we didn't. So we had a car. Where did we have a car? We had a car in parts of South Africa, and my husband wanted to do a tour for like he wanted to see a few different places in quite a short space of time in this one particular area. So we took a tour for that bit. And then the rest of the time, yeah, public buses and um, just, the luck of the gods. But it was good fun.
Amazing. So
Yeah.
sounds amazing.
The only place I would never recommend that somebody do that is Mozambique. It was extremely challenging. But
yeah.
the rest of the places were it's easy. It's just as you say, a case of like having to just wait and adjust your mindset. But Mozambique is really hard. Um, they don't have they don't have any means of booking the buses in advance unless you are local, because you have to use this app called M-Pesa, which you might have come across in some places. But you cannot get on the bus unless you have pre-booked. So it's
Oh,
very difficult for tourists, but we managed it. Like as you say, people are so kind and friendly, and like they did their best to help us out, but it was definitely challenging. So yeah. So what other kinds of transport have you guys ended up on? Obviously, you've had the ferries, you've had some buses, you've had some trains. Has it just been a kind of mix, or have you mainly tried to stick to certain things in certain places?
actually, if you want to know, we can tell you the numbers because we
Oh,
just
yeah.
recently counted. So we have taken so far until now, we have taken 79 buses.
Wow.
We have taken 39 shared taxis. We have
Mhm.
taken 29 trains and we've taken 4 ferries. And I'm only considering intercity transportation, not any transportation within a city.
Yeah.
So we take the transport that is the normally we take the transport that is recommended to us by locals. So
Okay.
if we have a local contact, we will always ask what is the best mean of transport to go there and there, and people would recommend us, no, you have to take a bus, or no, take that, take a taxi, whatever they recommend.
Hmm.
And yeah, we want to say that we also stretch the term public transport a bit. For us, public transport is not only train and buses.
Yeah.
Because in some countries, I want to give you a specific example, Tajikistan. In a country like Tajikistan, it consists, 93% of the country consists of mountains. I have no idea how someone would construct a railway track there. I think it's impossible. So the mean of transportation there is shared taxis.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's also a big a thing that we don't really consider in Europe. We don't have shared taxis. We have something like BlaBlaCar,
Yeah.
where we share rides, but not as a mean of public transportation. We understand it. as well as hitchhiking.
Yeah.
Hitchhiking can be part of public transport, and I have a specific example here as well. In Kazakhstan, it's actually normal to hitchhike within cities.
Hmm.
So they have a fixed price. Everyone knows. I think in Aktawa city, it's 500 tenge for a ride within the city. Everyone knows it, and everyone who wants to take someone would stop the car and give this person a ride. So locals do it
Yeah.
as well.
And that way it's great because it actually benefits the local people in some way, if they're like, I just need a couple, like I need 500. What was the currency? Sorry?
Tenge.
Tenge.
Tenge. Yeah. So if they're like, I just need a bit of money, they can grab a hitchhiker. It was actually the same in Fiji. They had like a price. And I was thinking it's wild actually to me because when we would hitchhike in Europe, hitchhiking's usually free, I would say, or like you pay a little bit for the petrol, but it's generally free. And I was thinking like if people go there and they didn't know that you have to pay, then they could make a big kind of social error there. Um, but absolutely, I love hitchhiking. I think it's a really like not underrated, but sort of not considered as much means of getting around in different places.
And you get to meet so many locals. This is something that is so beautiful. It's not only to get from A to B, but it's the connections you make with the people. Because people take you as a hitchhiker because they want to know about you.
Yeah,
Like very rarely you just sit for 8 hours next to someone without speaking. Even if there is a language barrier, you
yeah,
will have a conversation in some way or the other, and you
yeah,
will learn about their story. They try to learn about your traveling story, and you make so much beautiful connections when hitchhiking. So
yeah.
that's another factor. It's not only about a free ride actually, and you mentioned the social like awareness of the social error
Mm,
that you possibly could make in not knowing that hitchhiking in a place is not for free. Um, this is something that you kind of have to feel or maybe talk to people and kind of figure out. And if you, for example, you see that other people on the ride are paying for that, then yeah, you also just chip in a little bit
yeah.
of money. Um, but you still come from A to B, which is super nice.
Yeah, and to be fair, most people will tell you like, give me my money,
Yeah.
like in a nice way. But yeah, it's a beautiful thing, and like I will happily pick up hitchhikers now, having done it myself, because I think it's just nice. Like you said, you can learn a bit about someone and help them,
Yeah.
and usually make their day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's sustainable because you go there anyway.
Yes, exactly. It's like share. It's like a ride share, as you said. It's not
Yeah.
like that car's going, you're getting in, and you're saving yourself from taking a different car, like a taxi or something like that. So
Yeah.
I love it. I absolutely love hitchhiking. And in your opinion, what makes local travel and traveling kind of like a local sustainable? We've talked a little bit about bits of this, but what makes it sustainable to you?
I mean, probably the most obvious factor, we don't take flights. I think the
Hmm.
biggest share of emissions when you travel is the mode of transportation, or if you take a flight, it is the flight itself.
Yeah.
So that obviously, I don't know exact numbers, but I think there's a big difference between taking a flight or taking a bus or a taxi or a ferry or a train in the country. But also, as you said already, in many cases you support the local communities, you
Yeah.
support the local people. In many countries, there's no established railway or bus or transportation system by the government. There is no company behind it. It's the local people who own a car, who make the living out of taking people from A to B
Mm,
2, 3, 4 times a day. And this is how they feed their families. And
yeah.
you know that the money you give them goes into their pocket and it's their responsibility to maintain the car, to buy the petrol, and to feed the family from this. And so it's a very direct way to support local communities, which is obviously a very sustainable way of traveling.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. And I think what you said at the beginning, I think it was you, Dennis, when you were saying how you just get to learn more about these places that you're going through. It's not just a case of flying. Actually, it was you, Teresa, who said it's not just a case of flying over the places that are going to be perhaps like scary or that you haven't heard as much about. It's like, right, I'm going to take the time, I'm going to learn about it. And with that knowledge, you can come back and tell other people and spread the word on your socials and just get to know a culture that is different from your own. There's so much learning to be done within that, I think.
Such a humbling experience. You literally sit in the same boat.
Mm.
Like you share the same food, you share the same hardships if it's 40 degree in an Uzbek train and there's no AC. You know, the 70-year-old babushkas are going through the same scorching hell in that train as you are doing, or the other way around. You actually go through the same as they do. Um, you share the same story in a way. It's such a nice way to connect to the locals. You are not the superior traveler who comes
Yeah.
from a different country and then takes his private transportation because he can afford it. No, you sit down on the same rock hard benches for 10 hours
Yeah.
and have the same butt hurt after the ride as the locals. And I think for both sides it's such a rewarding situation.
Yes.
Also for the locals to kind of realize, wow, there are people from other parts and maybe more wealthy parts coming here and traveling the same way we do. They kind of become a part of our society in this very moment. And there's so
Yeah.
many nice stories that arose from that because you start to talk to people, and what else do you do in 10-20 hours rides sitting next to local people? Of course you start talking.
That's beautifully said and so true. And actually something that I think I have considered many times, but never really like put into my own words is it's actually really beneficial for local people in places where they may not be as economically strong as like us and our countries to see us, I guess, not going through it as well, but like, sharing in that experience too, and also not being like above using the public transport, because
Yeah.
I'm sure this has happened to you so many times where you'll be on public transport and people are like either very shocked to see you or they'll kind of try and
Yes.
direct
Yeah.
you to something more private,
Yes.
something
Yes.
better. And it's happened to me as well, and I'm always like, oh no, like I'm happy, I want
Yeah.
to stay here. And it is a big shock factor, and when you think about why it's a shock factor, that is very humbling that they maybe haven't seen people who would be willing to sit in the same carriage as them. Like at the end of the day, we're all equal, we're all people.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, that's such a good point. I'm really like I like that you said it that way because I hadn't like put that into my own words before, and I do think it's a very important thing to think about. I mean, there's lots of reasons why public transport is sustainable, but among them definitely is this even footing and this like paying back into the community. So I guess like with your account, it's called Human Travel Stories. And I think when we were talking on messages before we came onto this show, you were telling me like that's kind of the way that you travel. And I saw a bit from your website as well. But what then have been kind of some of the best experiences that you've had speaking with humans, engaging with people when you travel?
There are many, but we want to tell you a few highlight stories.
Yes.
One of my most favorite story was happened in Iraq. So in Iraq, especially in the north, in Kurdistan, Iraq, you don't have much public transport, so you need to hitchhike again.
Mm-hmm.
And we were hitchhiking there, and different cars took us. And suddenly there is a car stopping, and it's a guy from Mosul, from the city Mosul. This is the city that was heavily destroyed when the Islamic State was there.
Mm.
So we decided not to travel there actually. So
Mm-hmm.
he took us, he gave us a ride for 2 hours. He was so kind to us, so welcoming. We learned a lot through him. And yeah, when he wanted to drop us, I was like, okay, can we at least contribute a little bit to petrol because he took us for a long ride? And he was like, jokingly, he was like pretending to be the proud Iraqi guy. He was like, "You are my guest. You can't pay anything."
That was offensive.
So he was joking, but in a way, and I was like, "Okay, okay, I understand. Thank you so much." And he said, "But there is a favor you can do me and my family. Visit us in Mosul."
Wow.
So that was what he wanted, and of course, at that moment, Dennis and me, we didn't even have to talk about it. It was clear that we will visit him in Mosul, even though we first didn't want to go there because we didn't want to do this, dark tourism thing
Yeah.
to go to a destroyed city. But the reason or the motivation was another one. So we ended up going there a week later, and it was probably one of the most amazing experiences because his name is Muhammad. So Muhammad, he showed us everything and everyone. He introduced us to a local sheikh, which is a tribal leader, I would
Yeah.
say. So in the society, a very high-ranking person. He invited us to meet him. We met his whole family, his kids, his wife. They took us out for food. It was just amazing. And yeah, probably Mosul is the place in Iraq that for me, I don't know, touched my heart the most,
Yeah.
even though I initially never wanted to go there.
Maybe
Wow.
even because the old town is more than 90% destroyed from
Yeah.
the war, 2015. And a lot of people, as you say, go there for this reason. It's kind of dark tourism. They want to see it firsthand.
Wow.
And so we never considered to go there. But then learning the background, not just kind of doing sightseeing in a very dark way there, but having this human experience. We had a friend there. He told us about what happened. He told us about how people lived through their lives in this dark time of the country, and it gave us such a better feeling of visiting such a place and understanding and learning such a place. It was such a human travel story. I mean, it comes back literally to the name that we have given our channels.
And I also want to make an addition. Mohammed also introduced us to his friends, and a couple of his friends are opening restaurants and bars. I mean bars, when I say bar, I mean like cafes,
Mm.
coffee shops. And you know, you are in Mosul and you can see the destroyed city, and just next to it you have a new cafe, very fancy, and they have one of the best cappuccinos I ever drank. And you know, it was so lovely to see how the young people, how they want to look into the future, how they want to forget what happened, how they want to
Yeah.
move on and actually build their country, build up their city and their country. And that was just so heartwarming.
Yeah, like they want to rebuild, they want to move forwards. You so often get that in those places where this disaster tourism, we could do a whole podcast just on that because it is really
Yeah.
like I find it very strange when people are like, I want to go and see how this place was like literally razed to the ground. I'm like, do you? Like, why? That's so bizarre to me. But as you say, like it's nuanced. Everything's nuanced. If you can go and support this family and find out, or not even support them, just go as a friend and learn about what happened to them. Like that is vital. Like that's so important to like go, not forget, but also kind of again, it's this thing of like evening us out, making us more equal. Like you're there as a friend on an even footing to find out about his life and his stories, and that's really important.
It sounds a little bit bizarre, but in the way we supported or did our friend and his family a favor simply by accepting their invitation.
Mm-hmm.
And I give you the example, we were one evening of those days we spent there, we were invited at the house of a friend of him, he knows from university. So the whole family invited us for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
We were the first foreigners in their house ever.
Wow.
And they were so honored and humbled just by the fact that we accepted their invitation. They had tears in their eyes when we left.
Yeah.
You know,
They didn't want to let us go.
sometimes you forget just how much it means to people having guests,
Yeah.
or having just contact to foreigners, to people. And it was such an humbling feeling. And it also made us think how we in turn in our busy lives back home in Europe sometimes a friend says, "Hey, can I come over tomorrow?" And you're like, I'm a little bit busy tomorrow. And you kind of see this as a burden in a
Yeah.
way to have a guest.
Yes.
And this is just so different
Yeah.
to what we experienced there. And it kind of grounds you
Yeah.
and makes you realize, hey, someone's visiting you. You have a friend. That's something so good. And it doesn't matter if floor is a little bit dirty or you cleaned your room. Have a
Yeah.
guest.
They're
That's
there to
that's
see you.
what it's all about.
Mm. We have a very good friend in Tanzania who, unfortunately, during COVID had some quite difficult times, which we won't go into. But we went out after the pandemic. It was during our honeymoon. So it was one of the stops, and we spent about a month just with him. And at the end of the month, it was so sad. Like he was just like, I can't believe you came, like, even though I have no money, and like, even though, and we were like, what? Like, that's nothing to do with anything. Like,
Yeah.
we never would consider that, like, we never would think about that. And we do have to think in like where we live in Europe and other countries in the global north, like, people honestly just value your presence and just being there. It's like just going to see them. And you're so right that we just don't have that awareness. And sometimes when someone's coming to visit, it's like, oh, I gotta clean my kitchen, or and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And you said you had some other stories as well.
Oh yeah, we have a story that is actually it's probably the moment where we were the closest to actually take a flight.
Okay.
So we had our parents visiting us in Oman for a holiday. They came over for 2 weeks, joined us on the trip, and we had to catch a bus from Dubai to Muscat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it was the very first time on our trip that we actually couldn't just turn up to the station or a day before and get a ticket. There was only one company going, only 3 buses every day, and
Mm-hmm.
they were all booked. And of course, we promised our parents to pick them up in a foreign country from the airport where they don't speak the language. They're,
Yeah.
seniors. So there was just no way of letting our parents strand on the airport. But
Mm-hmm.
we had, I think, 2 or 3 days to sort our bus problem out. So we solved it out. We solved it by simply spending the entire day at the bus company's office, because sometimes some people who have reserved a ticket don't show up.
Yeah.
Now, we were not the only ones doing that. Actually, a lot of Asians who work in the Middle East also take this bus out of the Emirates to do a
Mm-hmm.
visa run. And so there were a lot of people from Pakistan, from Sri Lanka, from
Mm.
many India, from many Asian countries who had pretty much the same problem. They had to get on the bus in order to not get a fine
Yeah.
because their visa was expiring. And so it to stress this again, we were all sitting in the same boat, kind of.
Yeah.
We all had the same problem, and we got talking. We learned a lot about how life is as a Sri Lankan person, for example, in the Emirates. And
Yeah.
um, there was 3 chances that day to get on this bus, and every time a bus left, some of us actually made it, and everyone was happy about it. You
Oh.
know, it was this common goal, this common effort also, because we obviously had to talk to the person in office. Hey, get us on the bus, please. We need to go on the bus.
Yeah.
And eventually, most of us actually got on the bus. And I remember this feeling sitting on the bus, and the bus actually turned around the corner. And we were like, oh no, this lovely Sri Lankan man, he didn't make it on the bus.
Yeah.
But then it turned out they took a bit of extra people. So around the corner, they made kind of a secret stop and let more people
Oh
get in and sit
wow.
on the floor of the bus. And the Sri Lankan man was one of them. And I remember this feeling being so, so happy about all the people who had to get on the bus and actually
Yeah.
getting on the bus.
Wow. And you realize like no like we always have this like me-centric approach when we travel, right? Of like, I really need to do this. It's really important. And when you're talking to all these people, you're like, actually, my reason is no more important than this person who could literally get deported if they don't get on this bus. Like it's all we're in the
Absolutely.
same
Absolutely.
boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that is
And it was
fantastic.
actually then the last bus we took. And I think almost everyone who was waiting there the whole day got into this bus. So
Mm,
some of them got seats, others had to sit on the floor, but everyone was just happy because everyone needed to take that bus because I think we crossed the border just shortly before midnight. So,
yeah.
no one had visa issues because everyone left the Emirates on that day. And that's what mattered to most people.
Yeah.
And we also made it to the
I'm so
airport to pick
pleased.
up our parents.
Your
That would
poor
have been
parents, they would have
dramatic on
been
a
so
different
sad.
level.
Yeah. Well, my next question was going to be about like the challenges you've had along the way, but I suppose it's all kind of interlinked with the good stories as well. No.
Yeah.
Actually, this is a fine example of an everyday challenge if you travel by public transport, figuring out how to get on the damn bus.
Yeah.
Because every country works different. The public
Yeah.
transportation works different. In some countries, you have an app, but the app may not be in English, right? So
Yeah.
you need someone translating it to you. It may be in English, but you may not be able to pay with your credit card.
Yeah.
So you need someone helping you, or you just have to go to the office. But where is the office? No one knows where the office is.
Yeah.
But that's only the thing, that's only the case in modes of transportation that actually sell tickets.
Yeah.
In some places, there's no ticket. You
Yeah.
just have to know which corner of the bazaar, for example, the shared taxi leaves in which direction. And all these kind of information just they force you to speak to local people. You have
Yeah.
zero chance to otherwise get this information and
Yeah.
come from A to B. And these are the everyday challenges that
Yeah.
after now almost 20 months, we don't see that much. We got used to it and
Yeah.
we kind of got into figuring out how to go about. He is having local context to speak about it.
We are so used already to just ask our local contacts, whoever, be it the taxi driver, be it a person at the accommodation, or be it our couch surfing host if we manage to find a couch surfing host, or be it a friend we met on public transport somewhere else. That is definitely a daily challenge. But there are other challenges. There have been a few big challenges.
Yeah.
So I would say there are three big challenges that were setting us back a bit. And
Yeah.
one thing that maybe many people are not aware of is that some countries have different visa regulations if you enter by land.
Okay.
And just giving you a specific example, it's India. So it's so funny because we also post on Instagram, and many people mentioned, yeah, what's the problem? Get the e-visa for India. Because I have to explain, we wanted to go to India. We wanted to travel to Pakistan, then to India, then up to Nepal and enter China like this.
Hmm.
But we couldn't because the embassy or the how's it called?
Consulate.
The consul, it's not a consulate.
Yeah.
Yeah, the diplomatic office in
Yeah.
Pakistan, Islamabad, stopped issuing visas for the land border.
Yeah.
So you cannot enter at the moment India via Pakistan
Mm.
by land. You can only fly in there, and you have an e-visa, but the e-visa is only valid for sea borders or airports, but not for land
Oh
borders.
my goodness.
And this is something, it's ridiculous, but it is something very specific.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because, you don't, we didn't think about that at the beginning, but for us at the moment, we have no chance to enter India by land via this route we initially planned.
The solution would have been either get the visa in our home country, which wasn't possible because we've been on the road for so long, it would have
Yeah.
expired by then. Or, and this is super ridiculous, what a lot of people do who travel with their bike or their van, for example, they go to Pakistan, they get the e-visa, but they fly out into a third country because there are no direct flights between Pakistan and India.
Yeah.
So they fly to a third country like the Emirates. They
Yeah.
fly into India, activate the e-visa, then fly to Pakistan to pick up their vehicle. And with the activated e-visa, they can cross the land border. But you
Oh
need
my
this
goodness.
activation move entering by airport first.
Yes, yes.
What a waste.
It is absolutely.
There is another waste, another story that was ridiculous, but it has a good outcome. Again, talking about Iraq. So if you want to enter Iraq via Turkey, you will not enter federal Iraq. You will enter a certain part of Iraq that is called Kurdistan Iraq,
Yeah.
and they have their own administration. You're aware of that problem?
I know of Kurdistan, but I'm not aware of the problem.
Okay, because we have spoken to three different embassies, and they all told us there is a law for federal Iraq that you can get a visa on arrival at any land border.
Okay.
And with this information, we went to the border of federal Iraq and Turkey, but you don't enter federal Iraq, you enter Kurdistan Iraq. So they can only give you a visa on arrival for Kurdistan Iraq, which is not valid
Oh my
for the
God.
whole country. So we got the visa, we ended up in Kurdistan Iraq, and we had again a decision to make. Either we take a 1 hour flight to Ankara, Turkey, and apply for the visa there,
Yeah.
and then go back, or we take 24 hours bus
Oh my God.
to a 24-hour bus ride to Ankara, get our visa there, and come back via land and
On the same 24 hours
on the
bus.
same 24 hours bus. And that's what we had to do because we trusted the information from the embassies. But
Yeah.
yeah, here in this case, the embassies were just not right, and
Mm.
Kurdistan Iraq is having different regulations than the rest of the country.
This is,
And yeah, that was a challenge. Now we can laugh about it. It's funny, but back then we were like,
yeah,
we had
48
even
hours later.
newspaper. Yeah,
Exactly.
Honestly, I
exactly.
think this is the thing with overland travel is, and that we found too, is that well, we have found on various overlanding trips, you need to have unlimited time if you actually want to like stick to your plans of being overland, because otherwise it's just not possible. Like you were like triggering me with the visa talk because I was remembering we wanted to go into Sudan when we were traveling through Africa, and we couldn't get the visa in the UK because it was too far in advance. So like they have all these visa rules about you can't get it like more than 3 months in advance, otherwise it's not valid. So it
Mm.
was 2 months for Sudan, and we would have been traveling for 4 months or so, so it wouldn't have worked to get it in the UK. So we kept asking every single country, every consulate, every embassy, we're asking like we need to get this Sudanese visa. Eventually we get to, I think we were in Tanzania at the time, and someone said it's really easy if you're in Nairobi. So we were like, that's fine, we'll go to Nairobi, we've got friends there, we'll stay with friends. So we had about a week, maybe more, to stay with these friends. And we went to the Sudanese embassy, and the guy just didn't like us, just took a dislike to us and was like, nah.
Oh,
And just we were just
Not
standing there
today.
like, we're so close. Like, give us this damn visa. And it sometimes is the case that all the information you've read could be correct, but you're still not going to get it, you know?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Sometimes you challenge an officer who just
Yeah.
doesn't like your face, your whatever, has a bad day and decides no. And there's nothing you can do. You hear a no and there's nothing you can do.
Yeah, he told us
Yeah.
like, we'll give you the visa, but you might need to wait 30 days. And we're like, well, we don't have 30 days. So and yeah, I think it was a lot to do with as well the fact that it was like me who walked in first rather than Murray, and it's obviously
Right.
not really the done thing in Sudan, and possibly our fault as well. So, but yeah, and then we had a similar thing in Burundi. We were told you can get the visa on arrival. So we turn up and they're like, yeah, you can have the visa on arrival, but it's a transit visa. So we had 3 days
Oh,
only. And then we had to spend a full day in Bujumbura, like literally the most bureaucracy I've ever seen. So we're getting passed from pillar to post, like go here, go there, get this stamp, then go to this office. Well, they've closed for lunch. Now go back here. Like, and we're just by the end, we were like, it's not even worth it. But we did get it in the end.
you got it in the end. Okay. Okay. Also for Sudan, did you get it in the end?
We didn't for Sudan. We didn't have 30 days to wait. So I mean, for us, we had a very specific time frame of 6 months. And we had said like we
Okay.
want to do as few flights as possible, but we already knew that we would need to fly from Sudan to Egypt because the northern area of Sudan was in like quite severe conflict at the time. And they were
Yeah.
just saying, don't, just it's not worth it, don't
Yeah.
go there. So we already knew we would have had to fly from Khartoum to Cairo anyway. So that flight it just went a little bit further than we intended to go, and we had more time in Egypt. So it worked out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, this was always the issue for us. I mean, we want to avoid flying, but we always said if there is a case like a visa regulation, or of course some
The
danger in
outbreak of a war
art
or
Yeah.
or of whatever in a country, of
whatever.
course we will have to fly.
Yeah.
Um,
This is
Sometimes
the thing.
you
I
you
think it's
can't avoid it.
great. It's fantastic what you're doing. Like it's obviously super admirable, but at the end of the day, like you are German foreigners, like you're tourists, you're travelers, whatever you want to call it, you can't exactly put your lives at risk. Like it could actually be really like dangerous for so many people. So it's like you have to be a little bit sensible with it as well. I do think that's smart.
That's something we also stress many times, that it's not about flight shaming or anything. Like we're
Yeah.
totally aware of our privileged situation in the way that we had this dream, and we it took a lot of effort and planning to be able to have so much, especially factor time, to have so much free time to do
Yes.
this trip the way we wanted to. And I'm absolutely aware that many people don't have this time if they want to travel to a country, and can't just spend 50 hours on a bus instead of a 1 hour flight.
Yeah, I
It's
so agree with you. I really, flight shaming is something I find it's so prevalent in the environmental community. And I just don't really think it helps the conversation because it immediately gets people's
absolutely
backs
wrong.
up and they just don't want to engage.
Yeah.
So I appreciate
No.
that from you guys. And you said you had some other stories about the difficulties as well.
Yeah, we have a very nasty, probably the worst story is
Oh
now
no.
about to come. And unfortunately, it's again Iraq. A lot happened in this country, but it was definitely the most intense situation. We wanted to take a shared taxi. We took a shared taxi from Mosul to Baghdad. It would have been a 5 hours drive, but we took, which we later learned, the wrong street. We took a smaller street, not the highway. We took a small street, and we were all the time at the border between Kurdistan and Federal, Kurdistan Federal, and you always have checkpoints. And maybe I need to explain that in Iraq you have three different types of checkpoints. You have the Kurdish army, they are
Mm,
mainly in Kurdistan. Then you have the Iraqi army, and then you have the Iraqi army financed by Iran.
okay.
And they often do not accept or do not let foreigners pass.
Oh,
And there is even an app, maybe you know it, probably you know it, iOverlander.
I
It's
think I've heard of it, but not used to it.
really, really, really handy. Many bike travelers use it because they put in where you can stay, where you have water, but also checkpoints. So yeah, what happened is that to sum it up, we reach nine checkpoints, everything is okay. We show our passports, everything is okay. Checkpoint number 10, we assume we will pass. And suddenly, this guy very aggressively puts his head into the car and denies us passing, is shouting at us in a very, very aggressive way in Arabic. And we speak a few words. So we tried to call him down. And yeah, he was very aggressive from the beginning. He didn't listen to us. And unfortunately, I have to say, I realized he also can't read anything in our passport because I realized he was holding it upside down.
Okay.
So for him, we told him we are German tourists, but he didn't believe us. He was telling us, or he was telling you are spies. These were the few words that,
Yeah, he
Oh my
thought we
God.
have a different agenda. He thought if
yeah,
we do business here, or if we are coming from some Western power to interfere in some way. And he literally had the tourist visa in front of his face, but he just didn't believe or didn't accept or just didn't want to accept. But the situation got super intense, and
Yeah.
I
in a second.
within a second. And imagine you're in the middle of nowhere. There's
Yeah.
no one around who speaks your language. It was only the driver, actually another guest, and us in the back of the car. And so what you have to do, you call your friend again, that Mohammed from Mosul, who said, "Here's my telephone number. If you run into any trouble, call me immediately. I will sort out everything."
Yeah.
The officer didn't want us to call.
Yeah.
I don't know what he was afraid of, but he shouted, "No calling, no calling," almost jumped into the car.
Dennis had the car and the
Phone
phone
open.
and was like trying to explain him, we don't understand you. We understood he is accusing us of being a spy. We understood that, but he was talking a lot and we didn't understand what he wants. So we
Mm.
tried to tell him, we want to call our friend. And he was like, no, no calling, no calling, no calling. And then the taxi driver, I think he understood that we want to call our friend because our friend was the one who talked to the taxi driver and told him where we want to go and everything.
Yeah, thank God.
So the taxi driver in the end told the soldier that we want to call our friend. And then they were speaking. And then when Mohammed talked to us on the phone, the soldier was really literally with his whole face in the car to listen what we are saying, even though we spoke English. And basically, they denied us passing. So,
We have to turn around all the 9 checkpoints, another hour back
Oh,
to
you
Mosul.
guys, that's
yeah,
rough.
The most intimidating situation on this whole trip.
yeah,
Yeah, but I actually think that's a really good point to make is like, because I think a lot of people would listen to what you've been saying and be like, oh, la di da, it's all a big adventure. But there is danger in this stuff, you know, like it is a case of being sensible and understanding when you're in real danger and you need to go. And it's not the time to kind of argue. And like you said, maybe it was a literacy problem, like perhaps he just couldn't read it. Um, yeah, that's rough.
Actually, we found out what was the reason. We believe we found out what was the reason.
Yeah.
The next stop where we wanted to go is a city. We have a friend there. He lived in Germany and he wanted to invite us to his home. His mom cooked food,
Oh,
and it was like so sad we couldn't go there. And around that region is a US military base.
ah,
So an attack happened there. And we were in contact with other travelers, and another traveler tried to reach the same region from another distance. But
mm,
they even denied him entering the bus. They said from the very beginning, no foreigner can enter this region. So, in the end, this soldier probably just did his job.
yeah.
But we didn't understand it, and
The
it
way he did
was
it was not the nicest.
no, it was
Yeah.
absolutely aggressive.
And probably he's probably frightened. This is the thing, but it like obviously to you in the moment it's very like scary and aggressive and it's like not what you want to hear. But I think it is really important to kind of recognize political tensions world over as well. Like I did have like a similar thing actually in Vietnam, like a few times people did, and it was quite a few years ago now. So it was when the tensions were still quite high between Vietnam and America. But it sometimes can be that difference of just like seeing like a foreign face or in particular like a white person where they kind of clam up and they don't want to listen or engage. So yeah, but at least it got sorted in the end with you going back. It's a shame you couldn't visit your friend. Yeah.
It's a shame, yeah, but I totally agree with you. In countries like Iraq, you have to be aware of the political situation and the
Yeah.
security situation, and you need to have local friends whom you can
Yeah.
call and who will help you navigating.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
thank
we
goodness
always
that you
try to
have
be
Mohammed.
aware.
Yeah.
Yeah, we always try to be aware of the local news and what's happening, and even that didn't save us from this situation. So yeah,
Yeah, that's true. Like just your way of traveling and kind of speaking to people actually saved you there, which
Yeah.
is great.
So
So I do ask every guest this, what does, and we kind of touched on it like a little bit already a few times, I think, but what does like sustainable travel mean to you, this phrasing of sustainable travel?
in my opinion, I think there are two kind of levels to look at it, or two aspects. I think one of the more obvious one, it's kind of the external, one is the internal. I think the external kind of obviously is trying to cut down emissions, like for
Yeah.
example on transportation. But I think like just being aware of your travel activities having impact on the climate, having impact on the countries, on the communities you travel in, on the people around you, on the local economies, on pretty much everything.
Mm,
I think a sustainable traveler is aware that his decision to travel to a foreign country implies certain things, impacts certain things. And it could be very small things like we had an example here. We were sitting in a cafe with AC, and they had a sign on the door saying, "Please keep the door closed because this room is air conditioned." And I got up, and a few times the door was open. And like these are very small things, but
mm,
it has impact that you leave the door open. The electricity bill is higher for the local people, these
yes.
kind of things. So I think the awareness is something that makes a sustainable traveler, and that can have many layers. which, as I say, starts with transportation, cutting down emissions, but also supporting local businesses. You had an amazing episode on ethical wildlife experiences. All these kind of things come together for kind of this external view, if I say. So, and then the second aspect for me is kind of the internal view for me as a traveler. Like I have a reason. Why do I travel? What do I want to make out of my time abroad? And it's
Mm.
I want to make life lasting experiences
Yeah.
that I, will not forget. And it's maybe the egoistic way to look at traveling in a sustainable way if I make human connections. For
Yeah.
us, again, it's about learning about local customs and cultures and meeting people. And this is what sticks to me. This is a sustainable travel experience for me because it sustains in my head. I will tell all these stories of people and places and things that I learned about the world, my grandchildren. It doesn't fade. It's not like I spend 2 weeks somewhere and I get about it immediately.
Yeah.
So that at least for me is sustainable traveling. And you had a few like examples on that, I think.
I think a sustainable way of traveling would be if everyone would just try to change one little thing.
Yeah.
Again, I don't want to do flight shaming. If you have family somewhere, let's say in the US, you have no other way than flying there. You can't all the time take a boat. But you can try to choose one thing that you change, be it you stop using plastic bottles. You have your water bottle with a filter and you stop using plastic bottles, or you have your reusable plastic bag for shopping and you don't take all the time a new plastic bag.
Mhm.
Or you can try to avoid unethical products. So it's just thinking instead of going to supermarket and buy 10 different things, maybe try to find a project that benefits local people. Just thinking about recently, we went here to the tunnels in Vietnam, and before that, we were visiting a project of Agent Orange victims. So
Mm.
why not buy something from them instead of from a supermarket? These little things. And if everyone would just choose one or two topics that are important for him or her, that would already change a lot. Um, be it instead of flying to my friend, I make a road trip out of it and take the train or the bus or the shared taxi or whatever. That's yeah. I mean that is what sustainable travel for me means. Everyone chooses one topic that is important for him or her that can change something.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. I think there's so many aspects to it. We cannot do it all. And sometimes it is a case of choosing what's so important to you and making sure that you do that whenever you travel. So I was just going to build on what you guys were saying and say that, like, by its theoretical definition, sustainable travel has these three elements that people always talk about, which is environmental, so the environments and nature around us, economic, so paying into local economies, and social, which is the communities and the people and making sure they also benefit. I always think about the ethical side of it as well. So I think when we're talking about wildlife, like you said, Dennis, and also kind of children, thinking about how they, how they, like photography, that kind of thing, like how if you're taking pictures, it's always important to make sure you don't get your children in there and asking permission, that sort of thing. And I think that if we get really bogged down in thinking, well, there's so many things for me to think about, and there's so many ways that travel has this impact, it does become very overwhelming. And it's almost a case of, like people will shut down, they won't be able to do it. But when, as you say, Teresa, if you take like a couple of different elements and think, well, this is really important to me, I'm just going to focus for now on my environmental impact, I'm just going to cut back on these plastic water bottles, or I really love people and like I don't have the resources right now to get a reusable water bottle, so I'm just going to focus on helping people everywhere I go. That in my mind is so much more impactful than beating yourself up for all the wrong things you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you mentioned this on your website somewhere that sustainable travel for everyone means something different. I
Yeah.
think travel means something different for everyone.
Yeah.
Like we met a lot of more extreme travelers, if you want. So some people who are on bigger trips like us, and some people walk, some people cycle,
Wow.
some people, do crazy stuff, and everyone has his or her own story, and that is fine. Like there's no one right way of traveling, and equally there's no one right way of sustainable travel. I think that's why I said it kind of begins with the awareness that
Mm-hmm.
I have an impact when I leave my country or when I leave the house, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And however I want to improve or lower this impact, if it's a negative one, should be up to every person. And I really like, because I read that somewhere on your website, that you shouldn't be judgmental about ways of traveling
Yeah.
and about how people define sustainable travel, because every person is different, every person's travel is different,
Mm-hmm.
and every person's, interests and capabilities to lower impacts is different.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think sometimes I have people saying, or not necessarily saying this directly, but maybe implying, like, I don't really care about sustainable travel because, and they'll kind of say things like, we only get limited time on this earth. Like, I want to make the most of it and I want to do it like my way. And I understand this attitude. Like, I really do understand it. And I think that, we do only get a limited time on this earth. And some people just want to see as much as they can. But in my opinion, that doesn't mean being destructive. And we also have to think about the fact that, like, if you want to see as much as you can, like in our lifetime, things can deteriorate to the point where, like, you won't be able to see everything if you're doing it in such a destructive way. And there's always a why, like, there's always a reason why people do things like you just said. And if we can figure out what people's motivation is for traveling, we can figure out what would be the best way for them to engage in sustainable travel, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, last question. What are you guys working on apart from this phenomenal world trip at the moment, and where can people find you?
Okay. So we are now in Vietnam, and Australia is not that far away anymore. I mean, if you put it into perspective from Germany wise.
Yeah.
And we try to find a boat to Australia. There are two options, either finding a cargo ship that is willing to take us, or sail hiking, so hitchhiking on a sailboat. These will be our two options, and it's not easy, but that's what we're trying to, connect to people who have done it in the past, to cargo ship companies, try to get some context and information. That's what big thing, the big picture, the big thing we're working on. And the other thing is that people can find us on Instagram and also on YouTube, also on TikTok, but Instagram and YouTube are our main channels. And we are, as probably most people, a bit delayed with our content. So we are working on content. That's our main part at the moment. We want to, be more real time posting again. So we are taking a break at the moment, no traveling. We are staying on an island, where we can actually focus on working.
Yeah, but also it's the first time on this trip that we do a break.
Yeah.
We've been on the move a lot, and especially the last 5, 6 months were really intense.
Yeah.
We crossed whole
Yeah.
Central Asia, crossed China within 10 days, and now we're in the south of Vietnam. And it got us thinking that up to this break, we were travelers, but also through our activities on Instagram, we get a lot of feedback from the community. We are not alone with this style of traveling. And it got us thinking it would be super interesting to connect with people in the sustainable travel realm, in everyone who's concerned with flightless travel. And so we actually started to connect to whoever is like-minded, be it, I don't know, NGOs, podcasts like you, other Instagram pages, other travelers, because we really learned through social media that there's a lot of interest, and actually a lot of people want to change their style of traveling and
Mm-hmm.
want to learn and be inspired not to just take flights, and want to learn how they can travel the world by public transportation like us, for example. So it's been super great. I think the community is super, super open to connect. And we found many inspiring people who share about trains, travels, for example. And so, like, I want to use this as a shout out to anyone who's hearing this. Please drop us a DM and connect. We would love just to exchange ideas, because I think it's such a underrated but equally interesting and important topic to speak about. So we're super happy that we can speak about our trip and about experiences with you here. And we're happy about every DM, everyone who is interested in, exchanging ideas, because I think we kind of should collaborate on every level possible to
Oh,
kind of inspire
likewise. I
people and
mean,
make a
I love
difference.
it when people reach out to me. Like when I got the message from you guys, I was like, it's really nice to know that like in a world that is so fast-paced and consumer focused, like there are people who are doing it this way. And it really means a lot. So yeah, I hope people do reach
It's
out, and I
good.
hope they reach out to all of us.
It makes a difference. It really makes a difference to be visible and hearable. And remember the story of the 2 bus rides to get the right visa from Iraq to Turkey? That was a turning point for us. That was a few months into the trip, and we posted about it, and we literally posted, why the heck are we doing this? And because it was 50 hours on a bus within 72 hours of lifetime.
That's a lot.
And we got so many messages of people saying, you guys inspired us to not take flight, but to travel Europe by train, or to visit my friend in Barcelona by train, or to make a road trip out of what something would have been just 2 flights. So many confirming and lovely messages that people actually listen and actually are inspired by this. And this was a turning point for us to understand. And it's more about, connecting with people and showing that it is possible. I always say it is possible.
And also showing us there are actually many people out there who want to do something similar. I mean, not in the long term, but in general, they want to cut off flights, but they're not sure because many people say, oh, it's just easy, take a flight. But I was so positive. It was the first time I realized we are actually inspiring people of taking a train instead of a flight. And that was, this time when we made this decision, all the messages we got, they were so encouraging, and they keep us going, and they keep us not taking flights.
I love that. I mean, I really do think that when it comes to traveling, I see so many people who genuinely are craving that human connection and like the interest to meet people and have an adventure in a way. And it is true that like when you put that out there and say, look, this is possible, and I'm not like anybody that different from you, like you could also do this. I think people do really take a lot more inspiration than. So yeah, that's absolutely fantastic. I love that. So just for the Spotify listeners, guys, can you give us the names of your socials so people can find you?
On TikTok, you can find us under human.travel.stories. And on YouTube, we are just Human Travel Stories. And we also have a website where we have where we are telling some stories. It's just humantravelstories.com.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much for that. So did you guys have anything else that you wanted to talk about on this topic, or shall we wrap up?
I just maybe want to give an outlook because it seems that we're close to our final destination. Vietnam, Australia is not that big of a distance.
Well, just 5,000 kilometers.
Just.
It's nothing.
Yeah, see how perceptions change when you travel such big differences. But we kind of have, I mean, vision is maybe a big word, but I think even after this trip, we kind of want to, we want to travel more, that's for sure. So this is not our last trip. Because, on such a big trip, you realize that you're a traveler by heart and you can't do anything else, kind of. And I just would like to inspire more people, even after this trip, be it in Europe or anywhere else. Maybe we will travel Europe next in a very sustainable way, or I don't know. But I think this is something that really, really kind of the vocation kind of found us to inspire people by traveling the way we do, and also help people to make these human connections we do. Because many people ask us, how can you encounter so many people?
Yeah.
How do all these invitations happen to you? We stand on the streets of China and an English teacher invites us to her home just because Teresa smiled at her. These kind of things. And people see these stories like in every country pretty much. And they're like, how do you do that? And sometimes it's just small things. And we would, even after this trip, like to help and inspire people to have this travel experience sustainable externally and internally.
Yeah.
I already have a crazy idea in mind.
Yeah.
The crazy idea, because people keep asking us, how are you going to go back?
Yeah, I was going to ask.
Fly. I have a crazy idea. I'm not sure if I have convinced Dennis already, but I would love it. And then we will need all your information because it's a very common route. There are cargo ships going from Melbourne or from Perth to Cape Town.
Nice.
So I would love to exactly, you know what's coming, to take a cargo ship to somewhere in the south of Africa, Cape Town or any other city, and then go back via land towards Germany, towards Europe. That would be a big dream of mine, overlanding through Africa.
Yeah.
So
it's incredible. Yeah. It is really incredible. I think you would need to take the west side rather than the east. You might make it through Sudan and Ethiopia now, but the west side I heard is a little bit easier because there's just that one little strip of the Democratic Republic of the Congo that's apparently very hard to traverse, and seemingly the rest is not too bad. So yeah. But I would love to see that.
It's just a crazy idea.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Well, guys, I'm going to wrap up. You've been a dream. This has been a super interesting podcast for me, so I hope it has been for the listeners as well. This has been the Sustainable Travel Podcast. You can find us on Instagram at the Sustainable Travel Podcast, or we are also on Spotify. Please do not forget to like and subscribe on Spotify, and we also have a Facebook group which is called Sustainable Travel Tips Group. Thank you guys so much.